Hello, everyone. This is Greta von Kirchmann, and thanks for joining us for segment 2 of episode 3 of Earthling Conversations. I'm here with Joe Giarratano, and we are talking about, the topic today is peace creation, and we are talking about Joe's work from when he was in prison, working with people from both sides of the political aisle on issues directly related to the prison system and the criminal justice system. So Joe, can you tell us about specifically a topic where you brought people from the left in, where you got their interest about, involved in a topic that was important to you?
In some ways, the left was actually more difficult than the right.
Really?
Yeah, um, because, like I said, everything's become so politicized.
Okay.
Um, Getting people on the left, especially left-leaning politicians,
Okay.
Democrats specifically, involved on criminal justice issues or prison issues or even issues such as the death penalty was difficult because they agreed with everything you were saying,
I see.
but they would do nothing about it because they were afraid if they stepped out there, they would get beat up by the Republicans for being soft on crime.
Interesting.
So,
Now, is this in the 80s and the 90s and the was this
right up to today.
really?
You still have that same mentality. You still have
Okay.
Democrats that will not come out feet first and take on an issue dealing with prison reform. It's a little bit less now because Republicans have come on board for prison reform and criminal justice reform. So it's
I
easier.
see.
The Democrats see it easier to stand up now because
Wow.
they won't be painted as soft on crime.
I got you.
Our system's been so broken for so long that even Republicans had to come finally, of their own accord, come around and say we have to do something. It's costing us too much money. There has to be a better way. You know.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
so, and my case was a good example. There wasn't a Democrat that we knew of that supported my execution. In
Okay.
fact, most of them agreed that I should have been fully pardoned
All
for
right.
the crime. But they wouldn't come out and say that.
So would you write to or contact either you and or your lawyers
Or advocates would
or
contact.
advocates and reaching out to politicians, people in offices and places of power on the left of the political aisle, on the left, Democrat Party, left progressive, and you're saying that they would not step out.
They would agree with everything we were
And
saying. They would say, yes, this is wrong, this is an injustice, but they would not do it publicly because
And can you
very few.
very few.
We had a couple that stood up, but the majority would not. And that changed. But it
Okay.
changed because of this.
Okay.
We went to the Republicans.
Okay.
And my lawyers and most of my supporters said, you're wasting your time. Why, it's with the Republicans. It's, kill them all, let God sort them out.
Okay.
And they didn't care. And Marie and I and others kept saying, no, this is a justice issue. This isn't about the death penalty. It's about justice.
Okay.
And if we presented it as a justice issue, we would get their attention. And we did. And the way we did it, we took my trial transcript. And this is funny. Just my trial transcript with the letter and sent it to James J. Kilpatrick, who was considered the father and the grandfather of the Republican movement in this country.
Starting in the
This was in
70s. Like when does he come onto the scene?
Oh,
For people who are interested in the history of politics.
Probably in the 60s and 70s
James?
and 80s. James J. Kilpatrick.
James J. Kilpatrick.
He was an editor for the Richmond Times-Dispatch for a long time.
Okay.
Then he was a syndicated columnist.
All right.
And he was when he spoke, the right listened.
All right.
That was, they listened. And what we did is we took my transcript, which, was, less than an inch thick.
Mm-hmm.
Sent it to him with a cover letter and just asked him to read it. And we did it, and we didn't hear anything from him
Okay.
for maybe 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day we get a phone call from a lawyer in North Carolina saying, get a copy of the newspaper, any newspaper, because he was in all the newspapers. And he wrote a column. And he said this was outrageous. He said this was wrong. And this is a guy that fully supported the death penalty. And he said, no, this is complete corruption.
So he read your transcripts and understood based on them that you had been wrongly...
That I had been railroaded.
That you'd been railroaded, wrongly convicted. And so what he was saying was that it's not the death penalty that I am against at this moment. It is the improper application of the death penalty.
Improper application of the death penalty. Actually, police mishandling of evidence, the whole 9 yards. Now later he softened his whole stance on the death penalty because he saw that in my case, the problems that occurred in my case didn't just happen in my case, they were endemic to our criminal justice system in general.
I see.
And
did he eventually become an anti-death penalty?
Yeah, he did.
But I see. But at the beginning, he okay, so when you wrote to him, was he an owner of newspapers or was he in political office?
He was simply the grandfather of the Republican movement.
I see. So he was the spokesperson.
And what happened?
I see.
When he wrote that first article.
Okay, he wrote the article.
Every Republican right-wing politician, right-wing talking head, came out of the woodwork. I became the darling. The chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia at the time said this was outrageous and called for a full pardon in my case.
So, okay, all of these Republicans...
When that happened,
okay,
then all the Democrats that were scared to speak in my case jumped on the bandwagon.
So all of a sudden you have a bunch of Democrats also saying, hey, indeed, this is wrong. We are now standing up publicly. So suddenly you have both sides of the aisle agreeing.
And part of my job was to say, it's not just about my case, it's about the death penalty in the criminal justice system. And this is where the Democrats were more helpful. The Democrats started teaching the Republicans that this is a systemic problem, not just something that's limited to this particular case.
I got you.
We're going to be killing people. It's we have a broken system that's very fallible, and we're killing people with it. We can't correct those mistakes. And it just kept flowing forward. Then DNA testing come about to show that people were actually sentenced to death and executed when they were innocent. Now the Republicans are starting to see this is more of a problem. So it was everybody coming together like that. But they had to be reached in different ways. And so then the cost stuff came. That gets Republicans every time. The cost. And I go back to the medical stuff.
The cost. Okay, so we're back to the
cost of the
real
budget.
World factor that I feel like is often the one of the many problems in our national political dialogue at the moment is that the sides they not only disagree, but in so many cases they're talking past each other, and I do not hear enough earnest conversations about finance between the left and the right. Maybe our Congress people do because they're actually crunching numbers constantly, but people out us everyday folks, when we're talking, the left and the right, the people on the left and the right talk straight past each other about finance and the economy. They don't even talk to each other at all. So
well, it comes that you have people in rural communities and we're saying don't elect Democrats because they're just going to raise the taxes. We need to reduce taxes. We have to reduce taxes. We have to lower the taxes. But there's a disconnect. They forget the taxes are there for a reason. Without the taxes, we wouldn't have our roads.
Our criminal justice.
Or our criminal justice system. We wouldn't have that type of stuff. We have, these are the things that we have. So our taxes are necessary. Now we can just, the argument, the way the tax rates work, maybe there's a bigger tax break for the wealthy and less for the poor guy. But, you know, those are details that have to be hashed out. But if we can all agree that yes, we have to tax, then we have to, budget. We have to figure out how to budget stuff.
And you talked about the budget as it related to
prisons and the death penalty.
prisons and the death penalty. So when you had people paying attention to what perhaps programs were available for prisoners, so that when they get out, they have some way of adapting to being back outside of prison, and so there's a budgetary thing.
That's a budgetary thing. If you have prisoners coming out of once their sentences are served, coming back out into society where they're able to get a job and contribute and pay taxes, now they're contributing to society. But if they come out broken and wind up re-victimizing, they go back in, add to the cost. Taxes have to go up to take care of them. But then there's all the incidental costs. People forget, when I say that a prison budget is nationally, I think, to incarcerate everybody we have incarcerated in the United States is like $88 billion a year. But if you take in all the incidental costs of the whole thing, it's $1 trillion plus a year.
That ought to maybe resonate with people on both sides of the political aisle, because it's all of our tax dollars.
It's all of our tax dollars, and what you see happening is because everybody talks about public safety, what happens is when the politicians only have so much money and they don't raise taxes, they have to get the money from somewhere. So what they wind up doing is taking money from education, money from social services, and putting it into the prison budget. So now you've affected education and social services. You pull funds from those programs to put into the prison system, because you have a wasteful prison system and you have to raise taxes to maintain it. But to keep raising taxes, you still have to pay for it. So they borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
And all right, so we're going to end the segment in a minute, and when we come back, we can hopefully talk about how inside the prison system, how you had a part of creating this program where there was job training. And again, that is going to speak to people on both sides of the political aisle, because if you're using some of the budget to help people learn how to be economically productive, and part of the community, because there's being able to have a job, and that makes you part of the community, and both of those things are going to appeal to Republicans and Democrats.
Well, here's the teaser for you to get your audience.
Okay, so there's a teaser.
Here's the teaser for your audience.
All right, for the next segment.
I created a program that made prisoners productive citizens while they were in prison.
All right, so we'll hear about that in the next segment. Please join us for part 3 of this episode. Thanks, you guys.